Real estate investing Zoom, though, pay attention for a name change coming up, advance notice, teaser. But realestateInvestingZoom.com, we host this every Tuesday at 3 o'clock p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Eastern time, and everything in between and after and before that. We get together, and this is a great place for somebody who wants to learn how to invest, or newer investors, experienced investors who want to meet some new investors. And we invite vendors to come in and share with us their tips, strategies, and methods of success to help us increase our income and as well, and more importantly, maybe in the long run, increase our wealth. So we do this every Tuesday at 3 p.m. And I'm really excited today to bring in a guest who I've spoke to a couple of times. I've seen him on a couple other Zoom calls. I think as an investor as well as a vendor and a coach. Frank from the Cash Flow Kings. Frank P. I'm going to leave it at that, so I'll butcher his last name. Frank, how you doing?
Good, sir. Good, sir. Thanks for having me hang out with you guys.
Okay. Patalano?
Yeah. Patalano.
Patalano. Okay. Well, look, I love Italian food. I have some legit Parmesan cheese that's aged. I love my pasta, but I don't quite have the pronunciation down perfect. So good. Great to have you here. Frank, give us a little background though, before getting into real estate and what you do. Give us a little background. Where'd you grow up initially? Then how'd you get into real estate investing?
Sure. So I grew up in Rhode Island, and I started out as a school teacher, and I taught for about 17 years. And over time, if you're not a big spender, you start to accumulate some money. So we were big time savers, which at the time we were doing it, interest rates were like 5%. So it wasn't that bad to save at the time. And over time, it's like, what do you do with that money? Do you save it? Do you spend it? Do you invest it? And I decided to invest it. And I decided that real estate was one of the best courses to do that.
So what did it start like when you got into real estate investing? What was your first investment?
Oh, my first investment, I lost like $20,000 on. I went out and I invested in some vacant land out in Western Massachusetts, which was probably 2.5 hours from my house. And one of the things that you think about, you get very excited about real estate, and you often might think that you know everything. And sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And that was one of the first deals that I did. And it was definitely, some people call it a seminar or a learning experience. I went down to New York City and bought it at a land auction. And in the end, it was virtually unbuildable, or it was cost prohibitive to build on it. Let's put it that way. So like I said, we lost money on that one. The first way in which I really started to make money in real estate was probably through small multifamilies, triplexes, duplexes. I lucked out with timing a little bit. I started buying at the bottom of the market. And obviously this was before Bigger Pockets or any of the other big things were out there at the time. But the first deal, I mean, it still took, even on that first multifamily, I was self-managing. And I didn't really make money the first couple of years because, you might have a heating system upgrade, a new driveway, a new roof one year, maybe a bad eviction, stuff like that. But over time, because of inflation, if nothing else, and rent prices going up, you start to do better and better with the properties.
So that seems like a common problem for the newest investors is they underestimate the expenses in a property and the capital expenses that need to go into it over the long run. So you learn that in the short run. How do you share that mistake, or how do you teach the new investor to avoid that going forward?
In my opinion, you always have to have a number set aside for capital expenditures. No matter how perfect a property is, it's going to need work. And if nothing else, you should plan that in 5 years or something's going to break.
Right.
So, you should always have money set aside. So as we grew, I'll jump right to our second to last investment. I mean, we just bought a 5-year-old small boutique hotel in Punta Cana. And with
Punta
that,
Cana is in
the Dominican Republic. And it's a great investment. Like I said, it's only 5 years old, and I have one partner on the deal. He's a small percentage owner, and he spent a month living there before we actually bought it. And he's like, "Oh yeah, it needs no work. not work at all. And thankfully for me, I knew it needed work. And I said, we have to budget something for it. So we ended up budgeting, I think, around $25,000 overall for capital expenditures. And it's good that we did. Like I said, the property is not that old, but it needed a new hot water tank. We ripped out the kitchen and redid the kitchen. Right now we're redoing the whole small jacuzzi area on the rooftop, and all these small things that add up over time. We're probably going to put, $30,000 or $40,000 worth of capex into this property just to make it a top of the line property.
I think it's always the case. I'm on a nonprofit synagogue, and I've been on a few, and the mistake always is they have a building, they're excited to have a building, and then they just run the expenses as their expense, unlike a business person who would say, well, you've got to depreciate the building, but set that money aside. So we replace the air conditioning unit every 10 years and the carpet every 5 years and the HVAC system and the roof and the whatever, repaint every 5 years, figure out those costs, budget it out, and put that in the budget. They never do that. And really why most nonprofits fall apart is at some point, the expenses are so great, they don't have the cash, they end up either selling the building or just dissolving. So it's a classic problem that investors need to, when they run their numbers and calculate, you've got to calculate there's expenses that are, real monthly expenses, and there's expenses that come up once a year or every other year, but they're also bigger numbers. They're going to affect you.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I mean, you and I both know that they let you depreciate for a reason.
There you go.
And what you have to do is you have to actually think about that and use it, not just to your advantage, but to plan ahead using that concept. I mean, they don't let you depreciate the land because the land's always going to have value, but over time, that building will get worse and worse condition if you do not maintain it.
Right. The government's not giving you free money with depreciation. They're just trying to be fair to some degree. So let's talk about, what you do today. What's your primary, I know you have a real estate investment club, I think based in Rhode Island. What's your primary activities these days?
So about 10 years ago, like I said, I started to buy more and more small multis and then got into syndications and started a few businesses. I left teaching about 3 years ago. Well, it's really cool because I get to walk my kids to school, stuff like that. But what I started to do is, you're talking about the RIA. Basically, we had a guy that had been running the RIA for 15, 20 years. And he said, hey, listen, I'm done. I don't need this. I love the concept of giving back, and we try to make it as much of a club as we can. But over time, somebody had to take over the reins to make it awesome. And it's mainly a network and education group, which is really awesome. So that's the RIA. And then I do a lot in the syndication space. And I go out there and I look at and buy a whole bunch of passive investive partners on the deal, and they put their money in, and we put in the work, and we agent helper. So I have a virtual assistant business. We have employees in.
I think we got bad connection, Frank.
Different countries.
Frank, I don't know if you hear me. I think we got a bad connection.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Perfect. I shut down everything else besides you there, but they're on my screen. So,
okay,
so then I started. I started an online business with a partner called Real Agent Helper. Basically, I
think we lost you again.
Help my friends get more time in their life, and we do that in place in like 3 different countries.
Okay, so I'm sorry, you kind of went in and out a little bit there. So you're describing you do some passive investing, you do some education, and then you also have a virtual assistant company that you use for both the realtors, you call it Agent Helper, but it's also for investors who aren't agents who maybe need data scrubbed or phone calls or things like that.
Absolutely. Property managers, some attorneys, everything.
Got it. Fantastic. So, and just so anybody who's interested in seeing more about what he does, Cash Flow Kings is his podcast, right? You guys do that. What's the schedule on Cash Flow Kings?
I as a live. We just record and then release. It's our main avatar would be someone that's starting out in real estate and wants to learn about either house hacking or flipping, etc.
Got it.
But it's a general real estate podcast.
Nice. Got some real reviews there and some, you've been doing this for a while. It looks like. How long have you been doing the podcast?
Probably about 3 years or so. We don't really, it's not that it's not important. It's very important, but we don't necessarily try to monetize in any way. It's just something that we love doing. We love to interview guests, bring them on, and teach other people ways to make money.
Got it. So, and I'm sharing it on the Restream, but not on the live thing. Okay, so that's cashflowkings.com, and that's where we have education, events, network, and real estate for the local real estate investment. Let's talk a little bit about coaching. Do you have, I'm sure you get, because of the podcast, people come to you and say, hey, I want to learn about passive investing. I kind of like your style, the way you work. Tell me about what you do to offer them assistance. Is it the RIA? Is that the primary focus, or are there other tools you have for them?
I have some coaching just because I want more time for myself, but I definitely set up ways to help others. We might do some kind of twice a month hourly sessions or something. Nothing crazy, where people have an idea of what they're looking, what their goals are, and then go from there. But yeah, the networking in the RIA is priceless. I'm a firm believer in not just online networking like this, but also more specifically in-person networking. I'm probably out to lunch or dinner 3 or 4 times a week, and that's the main way in which I find partners and help others. I
agree with 100%. In fact, we're going to talk a little bit about an event coming up here locally. I promote once a month to go to for everybody. So along the way, and the reason why I reached out to you was the number one issue that stops people from starting seems to me to be consistently the same. What do you see the issue when people, they buy the books, they go on the podcast, they listen, they read, they learn, but they just can't write that first check? What's that issue, and how do you help them get over that hump? I hope the issue isn't better.
Well, obviously, it's all about taking action, analysis paralysis. It's all about, like I said, analysis paralysis and taking action. So if you think about it, the average person has a fear factor about doing a deal. They're always waiting for that perfect property. And you and I both know that there is no true perfect property. If perfect property, I would have done no deals so far. Every property has some kind of issue.
Yeah, as I tell people, I'm an agent first, I'm a broker first, and I also invest with Access Capital. I tell people I get paid to solve problems. If I solve the problem, I get a commission. As an investor, you get paid a return for solving problems. There's a problem with the property, whatever it is. Maybe it needs capital improvement. It needs to be brought to market standards, new management or something, whatever that might be. Solving that problem is how we get paid. If you're looking for a no problem solution, your return is much less than otherwise might be. So what do you recommend for people who want to get started as a great first investment? I know personally, I recommend some sort of a multifamily limited partnership where you're passive, but you network with people and learn and see what these people do, get more acclimated to it. I don't claim to be a teacher. I'm just a real estate broker and I'm an investor. What do you recommend to new people? What's a good first place to start for investments to actually write a check and get started in the game?
Well, the first thing is, if they do not own a house, the first thing I would highly recommend would be house hacking or buying a small multifamily 2 to 4, living in one of the units and renting out the other units. The government and the system has so many different advantages for people to do that style to begin with. Now, if you already have your own house, then I agree with you. The next step would be to find either through joint venture or through syndications, invest in the deal, definitely with some type of a partner. Okay. Some people are against partnerships. I'm 100% for partnerships. I'm not saying you just jump at anybody that you know, but take your time, find someone that you think is you can trust and can work with, and then go from there and invest with them.
I agree 100%. There's a saying in real estate, the teamwork makes the dream work. And I just don't know anybody who's made any real money in real estate without working with other people, whether, partnership or mentorship or some sort of relationship. But real estate really is a relationship business. We like to think, oh no, it's just my money and I'm anonymous, I'm behind a computer screen, I just hit the buttons and such. But the people I've met who've been successful long run, it's all about the relationships they have with people. Okay, so for those of you watching the call today, this is meant to be participative. The reason why we have this was as a supplement or an exchange of local events, which we could do during COVID, and even now we're in the LA area limited. But what I can tell you is the more you participate in anything in life, the more value you get out of it. And in real estate, the more you participate, the more money you make. If you have a question, I'm sure somebody else on the call has a question. So feel free to either on the reactions in the Zoom app, raise your hand, or put in the chat box if you have a question, just put a Q before it so I can flag it. Or if you're brave, just unmute yourself and jump in with a question. But here's a chance to speak to somebody who's been successful as a real estate agent, as a real estate investor, and been successful as a real estate coach, helping people get started in their career. So who's got a question for Frank? Anybody? I could talk to him for hours because I find him to be a wealth of information. Lewis says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Interesting. That's a good.
Yeah, good quote.
Yeah, I don't know who's that from. I wonder.
I do not know.
But definitely, you want to go together. I think that's definitely true in any business, any endeavor I've been involved with, business-wise. No?
I have a question.
Sure. What's your name?
My name is Kathy.
Hey, Kathy.
Hi. So I'll just put it out there. I find that my biggest challenge is the deposit as far as the down payment. And so I heard that you can go multifamily unit with a FHA, right? But how does one I know he mentioned saving is the best way, but how does one do that? Even if you are saving, sometimes it's just not enough, Is there any assistance out there, or should one just continue to save until they're able to come up with a certain money amount? I don't know. How does one go about that?
So the first question I would ask is, in your market, have you looked at the smaller multis? What would be the average price of what a purchase would be for that smaller multi, like a triplex or a duplex?
I'm in California, and as you guys probably know, out here it's very, very high. But I am in a rural area, so out here I'll say the smallest is about $400,000 to $500,000.
Okay, so at $500,000, you can purchase with FHA or some other programs down to about 3.5% or 4% down payment. Okay, so that means you would have to come up with at 4%. That's like $20,000, not counting closing costs, which you might be able to get someone to. You might be able to get the seller to include stuff like that. So I'm not sure how much you have saved, but that's one way to start.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, Frank brings up a great point, which is that knowledgeable FHA lenders and knowledgeable FHA realtors, when they make an offer, instead of, let's say, $500,000 for the property, they'll offer $510,000, but have the seller pay $10,000 towards closing costs. As the buyer, that means $10,000 less out of your pocket the day of closing. To the seller, it's basically wash. They're going to get $10,000 more, but they're going to give it back to you. But it makes it easier to get into. So particularly in FHA or low down payment loans, you want to make sure your lender's on board with that. There's some particular wording to make it work. Make sure your real estate agent. I know Patricia Castillo's on the line. She works on my team, does a great job of that. Make sure your agent knows what they're doing there. But thank you. That's a good answer, Frank. Cheyenne Miles, well, long time no talk to. Welcome to our call. I see your hand up. How can we help you?
Hi, I'm in the car, so I'm sorry if they're driving.
Stay safe.
Yeah, just thank you, Kathy, saying her concern around like coming up with the money for down payment. I'm a realtor, so I hear this question all the time, and I remind people that you can pull from your 401k. I imagine that you have a regular job. It sounds like you may have a regular job. If you're trying to find like extra money to save, it's probably your 401k. So there's that. But my question for our guest today, it has to do with team building. Because I've been a one-woman show for a while, and I want to, we're talking about partnerships and things. So I'm curious as to how you went about building a team and who your first hire was. Like, what things were they doing for you? Your business?
So Frank, in building a team, who are the first people you hired?
So for me, when I think of, well, I'll start with partners first because partners are the most important. And obviously a team is important too, but all my team is all through referrals. So let's start out with, if you join your local real estate investors group, or whether it's a Zoom call every month or whatever, building relationships through meetings of other real estate investors is the most important thing. And that's what's helped me grow in other markets as well. I'm invested in about 7 different markets besides my own. So in my own market, I try not to partner with someone unless I've known them for at least a year. Okay. Now that I can't say that I haven't broken rules before, but that's a good goal at least. Whether it's so we have a monthly meeting for our RIA. I might try to go out to dinner with different groups every single month. Sometimes over time you build and you have, a networking lunch with the same person, 4, 5, 6 times over the course of a year. Those are the kind of people that you start to build relationships with and invest with. Besides that, that's how that RIA is where I found a real estate agent. That RIA is where I found an insurance broker. And if that insurance broker that comes to the group every month doesn't work out, then I ask around for other people in the group and say, hey, who do you use? And especially I see that a lot with property management. So I say, are we being recorded? Yes, we are. That's okay. I say all property managers suck. They just suck differently. I've struggled with every property manager. Think about it. No one's ever going to do a job as good as what you are if it's your money. So I'm okay doing that with the cost of doing business. I just try to find one that I can be happy that they're working hard and they're not I'm not saying they're cheating in any way, but sometimes the quality might be a little less than what you expect. But in order to grow, you might need to sacrifice a little bit of quality so that you have some quality of life yourself.
That's real world.
Okay, that was good.
Info. As far as building a team, I would add to that, Cheyenne, a couple of things. You don't have to necessarily hire a full person. The beauty of the age we live in. I've been in this business since 1986. In those days, you had to hire an assistant, was your only option. These days, you can hire portions of an assistant. I use a TC for my transactions. I have various virtual assistants that do various jobs that they specialize and do well. And the advantage for me, obviously, is controlled costs. You're getting specialization and training taken care of because they already know what to do. They have their own computers and internet, so I don't have to buy and stock and maintain those things. It's gotten so much simpler. I probably have 8 or 9 virtual assistants currently, so much so that Frank created a company that's available to help with that. So I would say really, you want to figure out what the tasks are that you need somebody to do and find the right person for those tasks. And my experience is 90% of the time it's not a person, but it's an individual, but it's a specialist in that area, not necessarily a whole person you have to put somewhere. So something to think about, Shane, maybe that's something we could talk about offline.
If you like to read books, check out The 4-Hour Workweek.
Yes.
That's a great book to always think about this.
Yes.
All of the VAs that I have, it's $10 an hour or less. You guys are out in California. At least half of our VAs speak English and Spanish fluently. So that's one option. Thanks, Bill. I wasn't necessarily thinking about the virtual assistant side. I was just thinking of different people. But that is an example, a perfect example of your team. I'll give you a quick example. I bought a few triplexes 4 hours from my house. which 4 hours might not sound like far for some of you guys, but I don't drive it. In Rhode Island, we're only 37 miles by 45. So if it's more than an hour, the average Rhode Islander won't go anywhere. And so this is 4 hours from my house. Where did I find all my connections? I found the real estate agent through one of my partners on other deals. This is the only agent he uses in that market. Where did I find the insurance agent? I already had an insurance agent that did national, so it wasn't that big of a deal, and that real estate agent does full property management for me and everything. So I've only been on the two properties a total of 3 times since I've owned them.
I will say a common guest on this call, Melissa Yaloa, is in property management, RPM, Cal Coast, does a great job. Now she's focused in the South Bay, located in El Segundo in Southern California. Doesn't do the whole country. They do a particular area, but I refer clients there who are very happy with their service. So I would agree, almost all property management sucks. And part of it's the nature of the business, because we all want to save money. We end up with a cheap service. We get the service we pay for. And Melissa's service is a little bit more, but you really do get really good value. So, but I agree wholeheartedly that it's a very difficult thing to find property management. When you find a good one, hold on to them. Okay, question we have for you, Frank, is what made you, it says CR, but I think you mean DR. What makes you think of Dominican or Punta Cana?
Yeah, Dominican Republic. Why did I pick there? And all back to relationships.
Well, the question there also is, do you own the property, or is it like Mexico where you have to lease?
Yeah, okay. So I'll explain both. So first thing, it's all about relationships. So I own properties in Utah because of relationships, Texas, Kentucky, Missouri. I think we just sold the property in Louisiana. It's all based on partnerships, relationships, syndications, etc. The deal in Punta Cana, the co-owner of the VA business with me, he's a Rhode Islander, he's an American, but his family is from Dominican Republic. And basically, he's a real estate agent as well, but he really isn't a real estate agent. He got his license at one point. He never really did anything with it. So he ended up hanging it in Punta Cana. So he had an excuse to go there once in a while to visit and have a biz write-off, let's say. And he told me at one point, this was back at wintertime, around Christmas or Hanukkah, maybe even Thanksgiving, maybe that far back. He said to me, he says, you know something, Frank, someday I hope to own property in my parents' home country. And I said to him, I said, hey, listen, I said, I invest all the time. We can easily figure something out. So he speaks, obviously, fluent English and Spanish. He was down there. He started to look at properties. I told him, find something between $1 and $2 million and we'll invest. And he looked at a bunch and eventually found one that the average person would walk away from. Because what happened was, even though it was a new build, which sounded awesome, the guy that was the seller had no books at all. He was running it as an all cash business. So the average professional was like, I have no books, I'm out. Because he actually brought it to other people to possibly buy this hotel. And Pedro brought it to me and said, tell you what, I'll live on site for a month. I'll watch every dollar that goes in and every dollar that goes out of that property, and then we'll make an offer. Wow. And because he's a world traveler, because he has systems and online business with me, I said, deal, let's do it. So he lived there for a month, and then we made an offer. And the biggest problem for me, there's no leasing, by the way. We own it. We do have seller financing on it, so technically we don't fully own it until the note is paid off. But we'll say the seller was aggressive with the seller financing. We are paying that off 12 monthly payments, and then we own it. Going with that, let's see. The average American bank won't touch it because they won't invest in many foreign countries. The average Dominican bank won't touch an American citizen unless you're buying a cookie cutter, unless you're buying a condo that's easy, or if you're buying a single family retirement home that's easy, or a second home. They don't want to invest in an American business, per se. So we couldn't get any financing. I probably could have found some friends to loan me money, but we ended up doing seller financing. And I figure, even though the mortgage payment's about $50,000 a month, I have enough assets and investments going on that while it's hard to afford it, we'll pull it off.
Exciting story. And then, but you own the land.
Yes, we own the land. Yeah. So this is different than Mexico. In Mexico, especially near the waterfront, you actually can't, as an American citizen, I heard they started to try to change that, but you cannot own so many miles from the beach.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the nature, of other countries, right? They have different laws, not designed. We live in the greatest country in the world. I'm going to say that, and I'll take whatever political hit I take for that. But the reality is, we have more people who've made more money in our country than any other because of our laws, and other countries have different laws, and that's the challenge. Okay, so Youngson says, got a partner for a rental property here in California, wants to sell it, but I want to keep it because of low tax. Is there a way to buy him out without reassessment? So the answer to that question is, I think it's a little too late for that. If you bought the property in LLC, technically you can buy the shares out of him, and the property doesn't get reassessed. And that's how a lot of golf courses, for example, have memberships, and the membership changes, but the property doesn't get reassessed. If you buy
Is Youngson willing to talk? Because I have a question or two.
Yeah, Youngson, are you available to talk and answer some questions to go a little deeper on that?
Yes.
Mute yourself.
Hi.
Hi. So my first question is, what structure, what entity do you own it as now?
Just what you join on partnership, tenant in common.
You own it in tenants in common. Okay. This might sound a little personal. How old is your partner?
Oh, he is far from dead. He's very healthy.
We hope.
I read up how to avoid reassessment.
Okay, so let's ask a couple more questions related to this. Does he need the money, or is he just tired of of owning?
Tired of owning it. A tenant requires a lot of attention, and the property managers, like you said, we went through several, and I ended up managing it myself.
So if you're managing yourself, you could easily set up a structure where, number one, he's paying you to manage the property, by the way, at least partially. I would consider doing some kind of seller financing that's paid off over time, or you could even do a structure where if it's not paid off at his death, the rest of it could be forgiven. There's plenty of different loan structures you could do, like an installment sale that might change it, where technically you could almost keep his name on it, but you could have a pre-signed deed that you could take over or record at any time. I would obviously do this with a lawyer, but I think there are different options, especially if you're trying to save on the taxes.
May I speak to you separately later?
Sure. I mean, I'm not a lawyer in any way. We joke sometimes. We have about 3 lawyers in our RIA, and we give them out notice ahead of time. I tell them, I say, not everything we talk about might be above board. Not saying I'm trying to do anything illegally, but there's a lot of gray areas sometimes. And sometimes there's areas where when you're discussing it, you don't know. You're just throwing out crazy ideas and letting them hit. And sometimes a lawyer might say, yeah, that's a perfect idea. Go for it. You got to structure it a certain way, but it could easily be done.
Yeah, so my partner definitely does not need money. He need to cover the property only while I'm away. So on my vacation, things like that. So he had it even enough for watching what's going on with the tenant.
Okay. Sounds like you should reach offline and you get some specific details. But I will say generally to all the people on the call, this is the reason why and I'm not giving legal advice. We have an actual attorney on the call here, Jack Lapidus, our favorite attorney. Hey, Jack, how you doing? So this is not legal advice. This is business advice. You should never buy a property, tenants in common, for this reason. Now, if you have to legally for some reason, that's one thing. But in general, you should never buy, no matter how good of friends you are, because nothing will ruin a relationship like owning a property and having divergent goals. And while everything might seem the same when you buy the property, over time, and real estate is a long-term investment, our interests can diverge. And I gotta tell you, I made a nice piece of change the last few years buying properties where there's 2 different people own the property. One wants to sell, one doesn't. There's litigation that forces them to sell. I literally have a listing I got today in one of those circumstances. So you really don't.
Can I add something?
Yes, Jack. An actual attorney will give actual legal advice. Go ahead. But
actual attorney, not giving legal advice, giving common sense property purchasing advice.
Thank you.
Unless you are purchasing the property with your spouse, even your brother, your sister, your mom, your kid,
Yes.
unless it is your spouse, you need to have some sort of agreement, an operating agreement, an LLC with an operating agreement, something that spells out, if we start to hate each other, this is what's going to happen. And, have a lawyer write it up, because I have litigated that. And the number one rule is, if it's not your spouse, you need something in writing, period, the end. Doesn't matter who it is, if it's not your spouse.
Thank you.
Jack,
Well,
can you help our situation out?
I'm sorry?
Jack, can you help me out here? Can I contact with you separately and do something? My partner is very agreeable.
That's why Jack's here. Jack would love to write an agreement for you guys or help. you
Yeah,
out.
I'm gonna put my contact information in the chat for anyone who wants to grab it. And feel free to, it's easiest, honestly, to reach out to me by email first, because sometimes it's hard for me to answer the phone.
I've referred business to Jack and been very happy with his advice. And I will say this, unlike a lot of attorneys, will try to do everything. When it fits some other specialty, he's been quick to refer it to a specialist in another section of law. So I really do recommend him wholeheartedly. And
the other thing I do is I don't do stuff that doesn't need to be done. I joke that Jack Lapidus, the attorney, does nothing for you since 1995. If I can't do anything for you, I won't do it for you.
yeah, that's true. That's been my experience.
To go with what Jack was saying, we just bought 2 duplexes in a vacant lot, and we ended up doing a tenants in common with 2 LLCs. I have 2 partners that own their own LLC, and I have my LLC with my wife. And the lender did make us sign an agreement that's one of the attorneys made up, just a very boilerplate base agreement for that type of scenario. So yeah, it's definitely required by more and more people.
Nice. Thanks so much. Okay, so now we have another question from Ammon. I love this question. Ammon, I don't know if we can unmute you if you have a chance to talk about it. He says he's looking for 4 plexes in LA. And what I'm finding is that none of the acquisition is worth the underlying rents. Any suggestions here? Also, are there any LA REIAs I can connect to? So the second question, yes, for sure. If you go to the website LEREIC, LA Real Estate Investment Club.com, there's a website there, and they have an event every 3rd Thursday of the month in Los Angeles and Culver City, to be specific. On June 9th, which is 2 nights from tonight, right?
Oh, wow. Perfect.
So I'll be there. I'm a vendor there. I go there every month. This is one of the only 2 events I go to at night. I work 8 to 6 or so. I never go out at night, but this is one of the 2 events I go to, and the other one I host. There'll be about 250 people there, 50 great vendors. I can't recommend it strongly enough, and I promote it on this event. And so feel free, LAREIC, and they have a vendor. It's in Culver City. And it's free. It's free to go to the event, and then they have great speakers. The speakers often will promote their own programs. This week, 4 great ladies. I know Deborah Razzo personally, Jim Maldonado, Angela Soman talks about like Airbnb rentals, and Cindy Coleman talks about notes and rehabbing. So some great speakers and content, but that's definitely here if you're in LA. And if you're there, come up and say hi to me. I'll be there for sure at a vendor table. Frank, the first question, this isn't just an LA problem. I'm sure this is a national problem, which is people find property, 4plexes, where the rents don't seem to support the sales price, but somebody's buying it. That's why the price is there. So how do you resolve that issue?
Sure. I would say it's very much a national problem. I wouldn't say it's definitely everywhere as bad as that, but you have the major cities like LA, New York City, Miami, Houston, Dallas, where the cap rates are just so low that we're talking the 2s or even less, where the numbers just don't work. I don't know if it says in there, is Aman looking to own or occupy this or what?
Well, so I mean, I would prefer not to own or occupy it, but I'm also open to owner occupying it, and I think that might be realistic considering I might do an FHA or another home buying program that requires me to stay there, but for a certain amount of time?
Yep. So going with that, I think that's the only way it really makes work for that works out for the average person. You got to realize that especially in those top markets, especially with the appreciation going so high, right now we have a search for yield. Interest rates have been so low for so long that there are people that are just paying all cash. So you're competing with them and they're just getting a base return. You have hedge funds and big retirement funds in Europe that are looking at negative interest rates out of their own banks. So to come to LA and invest, which they are doing, and they're getting a small return, that's better than a negative return on their cash. Especially, and then when you figure in the appreciation that they're always predicting, I'm not saying it's going to be forever, but in California, it's been so long. It's like, wow, this is like a no-brainer for them, unfortunately. Now, the only way you're truly going to get a deal, in my opinion, is by relationship. Finding that off-market opportunity. I know everybody's looking, but still, the beauty of real estate is that you can still find deals out there. It's not a perfect system. So when you think of like buying a stock and you have two different shares of Walmart, you're pretty much going to pay the same price if you're looking, but you can find two triplexes on the same street in LA and see wildly different prices, even if the interiors are mostly the same. And you just have to be out there and keep going. I mean, I've only bought locally. I have not bought one property in the past. I bought one property in the past 2 years. And I mean, I'm not aggressively looking. Usually people bring me opportunities all the time, but just I've been spoiled because I had such great deals, 5 or 6 years ago that now there's still good deals compared to your market, but there's still not
Right.
great deals compared to what I was getting.
Right.
The other option is I have friends that have invested in LA and they ended up investing out of state, other areas. They were going to St. Louis. I'm not saying I recommend it, but they're investing short-term rentals in the Smoky Mountains, or they're in Phoenix, or they're in other places. So if you're going to own or occupy, I think that's the best opportunity right now.
Yeah, I'm one of those investors who lives in LA, does business in LA, and I invest out of state. I mean, I'll say of all investors I'm a listing agent. I list primarily probate property, legal property, so they're fix and flips for the most part. And I'll say there's only two types of investors who've been buying 2 to 4 plexes over the last few years. Number one, there's a significant value add. They're buying a property that's thrashed, but by fixing it up, they add value. Maybe they add a unit or two, they add parking, they add facilities. And part of the value add is replacing the tenants. They are able to get tenants out, replace them with market price tenants, which is a challenge in LA, number one. Number two, the other is, just as Frank said, they're glad to get a 2% cash on cash return for their money because they value the appreciation in LA will continue at 6% per year, 8% per year. And that's a real number. Now we can say, well, I want to be conservative and pretend as though the property won't go up in value. Well, guess what? It's a competitive market and they're investors who will look at the history and say, we're going to expect at least 6% or we're going to expect at least 8%. We're not building any more housing in LA. There's no tracks going up. Not even within an hour of Los Angeles are there any real development going on. And our population continues to rise. So it's a reasonable investment to say property values will continue to go up 6 or 8% per year. You add that to the 2% cash, that's a pretty good investment. And if you're buying it with a large down payment, of course you're very secure. The cash flow is pretty secure. So that's the only two types of investors. There's nobody that I've seen who's bought a property and just flipped it, a 2 to 4 unit. There's 1 in 1,000 that are able to do that. But very, very rare.
I would say that there's probably a small minority of people that need a place to live. They're not doing that heavy lift. They make good money and they know how much the housing cost is. So if they're paying $3,000 a month somewhere else to rent a place and they're buying a unit, a triplex for $800,000, they're not making any money, but they're reducing their own housing cost and getting some equity and appreciation out of it.
That makes sense. So that's actually, interestingly enough, wow, this is a great conversation because I'm actually experiencing a windfall of both of those. So the goal here is to find something that I can buy that's nice enough so that I can maintain a certain standard of living. So that's the challenge that I'm experiencing, is acquiring something at that price at a decent standard of living, right? So that's the first issue, is because I wouldn't mind buying an apartment complex and just breaking even if it was nice enough to live in. But something that I haven't considered is kind of the value add piece, is maybe taking a duplex or a triplex and turning it into a fourplex versus just looking at fourplexes that may be run down, because what I'm seeing is there is no room financially to value add because the pricing is kind of high. So by the time I spend money on value, I'm underwater.
Well,
know
it's
what
tight. And also keep in mind, Evan, this is where the difference between a retail investor and a wholesale investor. I have investors who are doing 5 properties at a time. They have their own construction crews. They buy stuff in volume. They're buying it
Right.
wholesale at Home Depot, not a retail at Home Depot. So their cost to improve something might be 30, 40% less than yours. So when you say, well, by the time I add value and spend $80,000, doesn't make sense, but they might do the same job for $50,000 or $40,000 and do it faster because it's their company.
Well,
So
if
this
you
is
know
where it
those
gets-
people who can add me to their portfolio of work, if it could be, because I'm gonna have money to handle the rehab. It's more so getting the numbers to align properly. Whatever loan I get will have rehab
Right.
cost factored into that. It's more so finding the opportunity where like the value add still makes it a nice place to live, but it
Right.
doesn't push the overall cost to where I can't afford it. You know what I mean?
So you need to network, like Frank said, find an investment company that's doing that work. They'll bring you in as an investor, and the plan will be you'll be an investor, you'll live in the property, you have a buyout process, but you have to find somebody who wants to go ahead and do that with you, because they're going to bring the expertise to get the value add done and to get done efficiently and at a price that makes sense. Because I see plenty of first-time investors that get the property and it takes them a year and a half to finish something that should be done in 6 months, and all those carrying costs eat up all the profit and the extra costs.
Okay.
Frank, in your markets that you invest in, sounds like you're in quite a few. Do you have issues with replacing tenants, COVID, pre-COVID, post-COVID, worse, like we have in Los Angeles? What's the issues that you see?
I think it's I think it's state specific very much. So some states are more open to evictions than others. So for example, I'm the largest owner of, it's a partnership. I'm the largest owner of a 50 unit in Idaho. And Idaho really did not shut down. Eventually they did, but I mean, I remember during COVID them having online court. And that was quite interesting because the judge asked the tenant why he wasn't paying, and he basically said, "I just don't feel like it." And the judge was not too happy with him, unlike some other judges around the country. And the judge basically told him he had 2 weeks to move out, and the guy gave him an attitude, and the judge said, "You have 4 days to move out." But that's not like that in most parts of the country. In Rhode Island, I would say that I figure the tenants being in place is part of the cost of doing business. You try to raise their rents, but I would never go full market to start out. I would bring them up a little and try to dollar cost average it into the next 2 or 3 years, especially if I'm doing it as a long-term hold. I mean, don't get me wrong, you can be lucky or unlucky, depends on who the tenants are. Basically, you could try to help find them housing. You can do cash for keys. I've done that. I don't know how it is in LA, but I know people that have given $5,000 or $7,000 cash for keys just for the tenant to move on.
Or more.
Yeah, like I said, everywhere's different.
In LA, it's very militant, and it's a whole nother level of expense. And we've had cases where people turn down $50,000, $60,000, $80,000 because it's going to cost the seller $100,000, $150,000 difference.
Do you guys have rent control?
Right.
Do you? Yes.
Well, we have rent control, then we have COVID, on top of that. And then I think we also have a court system that is completely rearranged and sympathetic to tenants.
So I am currently in 0 markets with rent control. So that might affect what I'm seeing versus you guys.
Yeah, I have a prediction, which is when COVID restrictions end, we'll just have some other form of civil disobedience that will prevent eviction court from happening, because there's a huge backlog. I don't think ever that group, that 10% of people who are not paying through COVID are never going to pay, and more people jump on that. It's really very destructive in our marketplace. But anyhow, that's my prediction. Okay, last question. Coming up in the last few minutes here. I really enjoyed our time with Frank. Again, I could talk with him for hours, but I'm gonna give you guys chances. If you have questions, feel free to put the hand up in the reactions or put a question in the chat box. I think I hit all the questions on the chat box. Or
When I get my phone back, it's in the other room. I'm going to friend push in property. I see that also out of LA.
Cheyenne.
Yeah, my Instagram handle is the Cash Flow Kings with about 14,000 followers. So.
The Cash Flow Kings on Instagram. Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Any last questions for Frank before we wrap up?
I have one last question. It's Kathy again. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Triggered my brain because the last gentleman was just mentioning that the numbers don't really match up in LA. And I think that's a challenge too. That's why I haven't jumped head first into the multifamily unit. So what is your opinion based off, some people go into like doing condos or townhouses as their first investment. What would you guys think about that? What do you consider?
All right, quick question related to that. Are you talking about buying a condo and renting it out? Or are you talking buying a triplex and doing a condo conversion?
No, just a simple condo or townhouse, renting it out, going FHA in the beginning stages.
If you can touch on the condo conversions
Bill,
too, touch on both.
Problem? Like, Bill, do you actually got a problem, bro?
Somebody might be unmuted. But in regards to condos, I got to be honest with you, I've
Got
never
a problem
owned
too,
a.
Frank? Huh?
Hold on a second. I'm making rid of this.
What'd you say, Frank? What? Oh, I'm not playing with y'all today, like y'all always doing.
I don't know what's going on, but in regards to condos, I've never owned a condo for rental. The biggest problem is that condo board. Usually you're adding one more layer of government, or one more layer of rules that you have to follow. So the CCRs or whatever they call them, you have to make sure that they allow tenants. There are some condo developments that don't allow short-term rentals. There are some condo associations that don't allow long-term rentals. There are some that don't allow pets. So you have to be very careful. Plus you have condo fees. That's just more things you have to really think about. In regard to condo conversions, I've seen a number of them, especially to my local market, though I did see it more in the last cycle. I have not invested in them. I personally am just not a big fan of doing you can definitely make money on them. But me, I haven't really bought a triplex in order to do a condo out of it, just because I just think of the long-term cost to maintain such a small condo association of 3 units. If you have they usually, I'm not saying they never work out. Sometimes they work out fine, but I have too much of a fear they're not going to work out when the roof is let go and the second floor is already struggling to pay, and the first floor says, "What? I don't have money for this." And you need a roof because the third floor has their roof leaking, into their units. So I try to do it at 12 units or more, or 10 units or more. But some people are fine. I've seen people make condos out of a 2-family or a duplex. So you can definitely do it. You just got to figure in the cost factor. I haven't looked at what the pricing is or know the pricing in your market to make condos, but yeah.
To add to the prior one, which is buying a condo because it's a lower price point, you said properly, there's some condos that do allow pets and some don't. Some allow tenants, some don't. Some allow short-term, some don't. There are other ones that allow short-term rental. You buy it and they change the rules and don't allow short-term rental.
Right.
Or they allow pets, you buy it and they don't allow pets and your tenant has pets. Or they allow rentals, you buy it and then they don't allow rentals. So you really have to be careful. Condos are typically ideal for living in, they're typically not suitable for investors. It doesn't mean some people haven't made money on condos. It just means your margins are tighter, your costs are higher, your risks are higher. You had some additional questions. Okay, we got to wrap up because we're at the end of time. First off, I want to thank Frank for being on here. Frank, so much for being on. The Cash Flow Kings podcast is fantastic. He's obviously, as you can just tell from that, you can wind him up and he can carry this show. But more importantly, they do the podcast regularly, great content about investing in property, all kinds of different programs from individual properties to investing out of the country. Check it out on Apple or Spotify or Google, wherever you listen to that. It's the Cash Flow Kings is his podcast. And then additionally, Thursday night, 2 nights, for those of you who want to meet investors, experienced investors and vendors, the Los Angeles County Real Estate Investors Association, the website's LAProbate, but it's a free event. It's in Culver City. I go there, I'm a vendor, come up and say hi. I'm going to be doing more work with them, but there's some great speakers. I happen to know Deborah real well. I know these, I've talked to these 4 ladies, they're fantastic. They're going to talk about women making moves and money in real estate, for women in particular, but even for guys. There'll be 250 people in the room. There'll be 50 great vendors that will help you on your real estate quest. So thanks, everybody. I'm just sorry that we didn't get to all the questions, but thank you for all those who did participate today. Jack Lapidus, thank you always for being on and for supporting. I appreciate it. And again, Les, thank you. Frank, we appreciate you. We do this every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. We live stream it on YouTube and Facebook. I'm Bill Gross. Thanks so much.